I've survived over 100 days with the Nintendo Switch 2, and let me tell you, it hasn't been perfect. Some people are already saying they regret buying this thing. Is the Switch 2 still worth it after all this time? Well, after 100 days, let me tell you my experience so far. So let's start with Nintendo's first-party games. What an absolute mess. I think it's fair to say that games on the Switch 2 have been weird. It feels like almost every release comes with some kind of drama, pricing, game keycard nonsense, performance issues, and honestly, it's getting really annoying because a lot of these things feel very preventable. There are about 4 exclusive first-party games on the Switch 2, and there are about 4 first-party Switch 2 editions after 100 days. Let's start with Mario Kart World. We all love Mario Kart World, don't we? Listen, I loved this game at release. I'll even go as far as to say that based on mechanics and core stages, this is the best entry in this series. The open world makes it stand out, the graphics are great for a Mario Kart game, and the character roster is probably the best thing about it. But after 100 days, I'm kind of done with it. I'll pick it up here and there, but there are just so many little things Nintendo left out that would have kept me playing longer. Take the free roam mode. There was so much potential there. The P-switches were fun to mess with, the question mark blocks were a quick distraction, and the Peach medallions, they existed. But all the collectibles were kind of just mediocre. The biggest issue was that there was no way to track which collectibles you've already found. You literally had to download an app on your phone, and that app wasn't even made by Nintendo. In-game, there was no way to know how many P-switches you got or didn't get, and when there are nearly 400 of them, that's insane. Something as simple as a tracker would have made this so much better. Now I know what you're thinking. Russ, my big boy, you clearly need to look at some Nintendo news because they just added a P-switch tracker. 3 months later! The day I'm recording this, they added this. Tell me why this wasn't a feature when the game launched. We paid $80 for it. This is such a basic collect-a-thon feature. It doesn't make sense in my brain! And when you did find these collectibles, when you finished P-switches, when you found a medallion, all you got were stickers. That's all that was there, which is fine, whatever, but all 3 collectible types gave you the same thing. Why even bother splitting them up in the first place? They could have all just been Peach medallions or P-switches. But there's even other mechanics in free roam mode that I don't understand were absent anyways in the first place that they still haven't fixed after 3 months. Something simple like letting us skip the cutscenes every time you hit a P-switch. Watching that same 2-second clip over and over gets annoying fast, especially when you have to do the same P-switch multiple times because it's so difficult. It just adds up. I've probably spent half the time playing these P-switches watching the cutscene to actually start playing the P-switch mission. Anyways, enough of free roam. There's also a battle mode. That was mid. The other modes were better. Knockout Tour was fun. Grand Prix was classic, but battle mode just wasn't it. And don't even get me started with the online play. They originally removed the 3-lap tracks that you could play when you were playing online. Apparently it's fixed now, but I haven't cared to go back to check because it shouldn't have been a problem in the first place. The worst part about all of this is that, as we know, the game cost $80, which brings up the bigger issue about all of this. Nintendo's pricing. This game just isn't worth $80. Nintendo of America's president, Doug Bowser, explained this price to the Washington Post by saying, "What you see right here is variable pricing. We'll look at each game, really look at the development that's gone into the game, the breadth and depth of the gameplay, the durability over time, and the repeatability of gameplay experiences. Those are all the factors, and there's many more that go into consideration of what is a right price point for the game. So I think you can anticipate that there will be variable pricing, and we haven't set a benchmark." That's right, variable pricing now exists. He basically said the price is higher because Mario Kart World has replay value, meaning since you'll be playing it for years, Nintendo decided it's worth an extra $10 or $20 depending on how you want to look at it, without actually giving us more gameplay or more content. And clearly, based on my issues with the polish, that logic literally doesn't hold up. The main reason I'm so salty about Mario Kart is the price tag. And when they said it'd cost extra, I assumed that they were going to give the games like some free updates of some sort, almost like prepaying for DLC. Now, this might be on me, but I think it's fair to expect something more when you're paying more. Now, maybe my expectations were a little too high, especially after Mr. Bowser's framing. Maybe they'll update the game eventually, but over 100 days later, we haven't seen a single glimpse of any long-term support. Big AAA games usually get updates or content drops quickly after launch, but for Nintendo to not even mention it or how they're going to support the game, especially right after Nintendo Direct, where the game was just completely missing from it, feels cruel. And the kicker is that they announced DLC for Donkey Kong Bonanza, a game that came out after Mario Kart World. Paid DLC at that. I'm all for extra content, but Nintendo, you forgot about your $80 game. Anyway, the thing about Mario Kart World is that they're just so silent about what they're doing with this game. We have no idea what's happening. Sonic Cross World. This isn't the first time I'm gonna bring that game up. They have clearly laid out their support plan, their content plan with DLC moving forward, and I really find that refreshing. I really do. Now, Mario Kart did just get a big patch. Like I mentioned earlier, it fixed a lot of things like being able to track your P-switches, being able to track your Peach medallions. It apparently fixes online matchmaking, but what's annoying is that these should have been there from launch day. And other games that are cheaper are much more polished than even this one. So yes, wrapping up my Mario Kart thoughts, after 100 days, I don't get why Nintendo hasn't shown us the plan to support this game. With Smash Bros, we knew about years of fighter passes before release, but here, nothing. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped a massive DLC pack later and charged us more for it. And as a Nintendo fan, that's just something that they would do, unfortunately. But before we move on any further, I have a special announcement. I have started a second YouTube channel, currently known as Russ Vandy 2. The title is pending. Let me know if you have any different names for it in the comments. On this channel, I'll be posting a lot more frequently, and it gives me a chance to spew out my unfiltered, unscripted opinion, and it allows me to talk about a lot more stuff that I find might not do as well on this main channel. So please, go subscribe, go check it out. I think a lot of you will actually enjoy what I have to say, and it's a little more for the hardcore Nintendo audience, or the true gamers out there. So go check out the channel, subscribe, and tell myself that I sent you from this video. Anyways, let's talk about the other big Nintendo Switch exclusive game, Donkey Kong Bonanza, because this game is actually fantastic. This is one that made me feel like the Switch 2 was actually going to cook. Like, this gave me a new kind of hope for the Switch 2. It's beautiful. It shows off the hardware in the classic Nintendo way. Watching Donkey Kong smash through the ground with rubble and debris flying everywhere, paired with all the crazy effects, made this one the most visually stunning Nintendo game I think that has ever been released. But what I appreciate most is the gameplay and the care that went into it, especially coming straight off of Mario Kart. Each world is packed with bananas, which is the main collectible, and gathering them actually matters because you can upgrade Donkey Kong with them. Other collectibles also serve a real purpose too, like fossils letting you buy costumes in the shops. And best of all, they're trackable. Wow, what a basic feature that should be mandatory in every collectathon. On top of that, the story and environments really added to the passion behind this game. Who knew a singing girl in Donkey Kong could make me so emotional? Seriously, the story went off. This is what I was looking for, and what I expected from a $70 first-party Nintendo release. I honestly would have been fine if they just dropped this game for $70 and didn't touch it again. Not even an update. I wouldn't even care about an update. Like, seriously, I was that content with how it started and finished. For $70, Nintendo actually delivered a full game. And yes, $70 is still more than the $60 we've been used to for years, but at the same time, this has become industry standard, especially for current-gen consoles like the Switch 2, so I'm actually fine with it. I'll say it. I'm okay with Donkey Kong Bonanza being $70. And then they released DLC, which was fine. It was fine. Like, the DLC was fine. In fact, it was good DLC. But a lot of people argue that since it was released so soon after launch, Nintendo just held it back from the main game to charge us extra for it later. And while I see that argument, and honestly, I'd agree it's a little cocky for Nintendo to drop paid DLC so fast, especially while facing so much backlash on pricing, I do think this specific DLC is different enough from the main game to stand out on its own. It feels like a completely new mode, not just an extra map. It's fleshed out, it's fun, and it's not necessarily mandatory or for the base game. It's for a completely different audience that wants more. That said, I don't think it should have been $20. I think that's a little too much. $10 would have been way more fair. So yeah, all this combined has left the Nintendo community a little more frustrated than usual. It doesn't help that after they announced this DLC, they announced Pokemon Legends ZA paid DLC before the game was even released. Nintendo, you need to read the room. You actually need to read the room. Who said this was a good idea? Anyways, those aren't even the only first-party games that we got on the Nintendo Switch 2 so far. We can't forget about Welcome Tour and Drag X Drive. Just kidding, you can. You can forget about them. Those are basically just tech demos. They're both good in their own right, but they're tech demos. Drag and Drive got a little more hate than I think deserves though. I did a whole video on that. You should check it out after this one. Now you might be thinking after 100 days, that's not that many games. Well, let me tell you about this. Nintendo padded out their exclusive Nintendo Switch 2 games with what they call Nintendo Switch 2 editions. These are essentially Switch 2 versions of Switch 1 games. There are 4 of them so far, each with their own quirks. First up, for $10 extra, you get Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. $10 each, by the way, not together. That'd be too cheap. 2 already fantastic games that now run at 4K 60 frames per second. On top of that, they added a few extras like Zelda's GPS system to help you 100% the game, and that's a great addition and honestly worth $10. I would think that's fair. Then there's Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which was a little pricier at $20 extra. Now let's use our brains here. If we go by the Zelda pricing model, where the visual upgrade is worth $10, we can already say that the 4K 60 frames per second boost here justifies at least $10. So where's the other $10 coming from? That's right, the new DLC. Boom, I just solved why this was a $20 upgrade. And I think this is fair. It looks fantastic, the expansion with the extra stages was really solid. This was one of my favorite Switch 1 games, so revisiting it here with new levels and a visual boost was exactly what I wanted. They even added more Colosseum content and extra mouthful mode abilities. It wasn't extremely short either. It had a solid length for the price and gave me plenty to do. And the final Switch 2 edition that has been released after 100 days was Mario Party Jamboree. And this is where things start going downhill. This one is constantly brought up as the worst Nintendo Switch 2 edition, and I would have to agree. When you boot it up, the game asks if you want to play Classic Mario Party or Jamboree TV. Jamboree TV is the new content with a handful of mini games that use the Switch 2's features. The mic, camera, mouse, all that good stuff. And it's fun for the first few rounds. After that, it's just Mario Party again. I also tried online and the game was literally unplayable. But the bigger issue is that Jamboree TV is totally separate from the main game. None of the achievements carry over, and the base game itself got zero meaningful updates. No visuals, no quality of life features, nothing that takes advantage of the Switch 2. Literally not even a visual upgrade. So, if we go back to Nintendo's own pricing model that they use with Zelda, $10 for new content. Sure, I'll take it. But the $10 visual upgrade, well, that doesn't exist on the old content. So then why is it $20 more? It was subpar content and there was no visual upgrade. This shouldn't have been more than $10. I've just solved gaming. So this is what I mean with Nintendo. It's just gotten really weird and very dramatic. Nintendo has been walking this fine line with updates, DLC, and especially pricing. So close to tipping over into being unreasonable. Even some of my die-hard Nintendo fan friends are getting priced out. And I know a lot of others are too. It just leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And after 100 days, Nintendo doesn't seem to be getting the message. In the most recent Nintendo Direct, we saw $40 amiibo and $50 amiibo, which yes, looks cool, but is absurdly expensive. I don't know what I said there. It's absurdly expensive is what I meant to say. And the announcement of the Virtual Boy on NSO sounds cool until you learn the only way to play it is buying at least $25 worth of cardboard or $100 for the cool headset. And that library is capped at like 14 games or something. And don't forget, you're still paying your NSO subscription on top of that. You might be able to play them without the headset, but honestly, I'm not even sure yet. I do think you need it. Oh, and we can't forget about the 2 games that Nintendo's selling for $40 each or $70 together. That's right, the new Mario Galaxy games are being released, even though we've seen Nintendo sell them cheaper before. At this point, I'm honestly surprised they didn't just go full Nintendo and sell them separately for $60 each, like they've done with other games in the last 2 years. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD and Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, I'm looking at you. Being a Nintendo fan has never been so expensive, and I really think Nintendo needs to read the room. Like, imagine if they released both Mario Galaxy games at $60 for the pair instead of $70. That would have instantly made the deal feel so much better. But no, they're charging more and damaging their reputation in the process. I can't imagine that extra $10 being worth it for them long term, but who knows, maybe it is. Because of all these silly pricing moves, I've seen people say they want a refund on the Nintendo Switch 2, and that's really unfortunate. And it just shows how baffling some of Nintendo's decisions have been lately. I don't think I've heard one person say they want a refund on their PS5 or Xbox Series. Actually, maybe the Xbox, but not their PS5. And I also don't think anyone has ever had an issue with their Switch 1 back when that released, aside from maybe the Joy-Con drift. But I've really never heard so many people say they've had buyer's remorse on a console like this. Now, all that being said, while I hate how expensive things have gotten, I do have to give Nintendo props for actually delivering multiple fantastic games already and announcing plenty more for the near future. We've still got a huge lineup for first-party titles coming up, and while yeah, they're pricier, at the end of the day, these are all really fun games, and if you don't want to support them, don't buy them. Nintendo is basically the only company that consistently puts out high-quality quality titles, for the most part. I've seen people claim Nintendo isn't releasing any new games, and to that, I have to say, bro, look how many they already have on the calendar, and say that again with a straight face. Even with the higher prices, I'd rather Nintendo actually release games than end up like Xbox or PlayStation, where we're lucky to see a handful of major exclusives ever. Right now I can maybe think of 3 or 4 PlayStation or Xbox games coming next year, if they don't get delayed. Meanwhile, Nintendo has 6 more coming out in just this year, and by mid-2026, we'll already be looking at 16 exclusive Switch 2 games if everything stays on track. That's insane! That's as much as PlayStation 5 has, I think, ever, and that's already been out for like 5 years. So while we might not be buying every new game, because our wallets can only stretch so far, at least Nintendo's giving us a steady stream to pick and choose from, and I'm still excited for them. I know it might sound like I'm angry at Nintendo, and yes, I kind of am about the pricing, but I do love these new games, and I can't wait to see what they've got in store for us next. Wow. I can't believe we just talked about first-party games that entire time. We haven't even talked about third-party games, because honestly, they're still kind of a hit or miss. When it comes to Switch 2 third-party games, I've run into 3 major problems after exclusively playing this console for over 100 days since launch. First of all, no Switch 2 editions, or should I say, a lack of Switch 2 editions. It's kind of weird. You'd think with a brand new system, tons of game companies and developers would want their new releases here, but a lot of games are still only coming to the Switch 1 instead of both, and that could just be because either studios don't have the dev kits in time, or they just didn't think a Switch 2 version was worth the effort. And it's not just random small games either. Even big ones skipped Switch 2 on day one, like Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. That game launched on PS5, Xbox Series, PC, and Switch 1, but not the Switch 2, which makes 0 sense when Sega already had dev kits and literally launched Sonic X Shadow Generations and Yakuza 0 on Switch 2 at release. And it's not just Sonic Cross Worlds that's doing this. You have hit games like Garfield Kart and Lego Party as well. Yes, I'm serious. The second problem is mediocre ports. Now, I'm happy that Switch 2 versions of every game, or most third-party games, exist, but they usually aren't the prettiest. Now, a lot of people, including myself, expected this console to blow us away graphically, and sometimes it does. Final Fantasy VII Remake is exactly how a Switch 2 port should look, but more often, a big AAA game comes in running at 1080p or lower, barely showing off the console's 4K capabilities, and almost always they're locked at 30 frames per second. Borderlands 4, Star Wars Outlaws, Final Fantasy VII, Split Fiction, all look amazing on other platforms, but here, scaled back graphics, capped frame rates, and not much next-gen wow factor. Now, that being said, I think people are a little bit too harsh on the Switch 2 for this. Remember, it's a handheld console, literally a fraction of the size of the machines it's competing against. It's still impressive, and personally, I'd still rather take slight graphics downgrades if it means I can play these games handheld. And honestly, I've been using my Switch 2 in handheld way more than I ever did with the Switch 1. And I can't say that this is like a deal breaker, because for a lot of people, the Switch 2 might be the only option they have to play these games. So I'm happy that they're here, I'm happy that I can collect them, and I'm happy I can play them handheld. But compared to other consoles, I can see why this would be a step back. All right, now for the biggest issue I think I've seen, game keycards. I can't believe we're still talking about this. If you don't collect physical games, then you probably won't care about this, but we gotta talk about game keycards anyways. The game keycard fiasco is still a hot topic over 100 days later, which kind of blows my mind. Usually something like this happens and then it's forgotten about in like a month or two. But no, this is still going. Here's the deal. Publishers push them to save money instead of spending more on 64GB physical cartridges, which are more pricey to manufacture. They ship empty cards that just give you a download, which a lot of people see being completely pointless because you're buying a physical game. And yes, technically it also means that you don't own your games in the same way. But to that, I say, even if the eShop goes down, which we've seen happen on like the Wii U and the 3DS, Nintendo will most likely allow you to re-download games you already bought even after that happens, which we've also seen on the Wii U and 3DS. If I bought a game back when the eShops opened, if I opened a Wii U and the 3DS right now, I could still download those games. A lot of people don't know that and just think that a lot of my Wii U and 3DS games are just eviscerated, completely gone. And I strongly feel like if the eShop were to go down, they would still allow you to download them. But at this point, this is the platform Nintendo's going to stick with moving forward, I think, indefinitely. So I really don't think that this is a discussion that we need to be having anymore. Regardless, game keycards, to me, I don't mind them. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but hear me out. One of the most important parts of physical games is being able to collect them, yes, but more importantly, sell or trade them to recoup some money for other games I want to buy. To me, that's what matters most, retaining the value. At least I have the option to sell my expensive games if I'm done with them, even on a game keycard. There's nothing worse than dropping $70 on a game, not enjoying it, and having no way to get anything back like you would with a digital game. At least with game keycards, there's an option. And I'm thankful you can still trade or sell them. Heck, a big part of this for me is lending games to my brother every so often. It's way better than Nintendo's virtual keycard system for digital games. So while I get the argument that people want their full game on the cartridge or want to feel like they truly own it, it just doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. Even if it was on the cartridge, most of the time there's a big day one patch anyways. And we've seen cases where games run slower off the cartridge than the Switch 2's SSD. Star Wars Outlaws, for example, didn't even bother with the cartridge option because the card would have been too slow to handle the open world properly. Even first-party stuff like Mario Kart World shows shorter load times when running off the system. Listen, I'm not trying to defend game key cards. I'd still prefer any game on the cartridge. And yes, a key card feels kind of empty, but at the end of the day, even though it's just a piece of plastic, it still holds value. And let's not forget, games are games. If I or you like a game, buy the game. And if you don't like a game, sell the game when you're done. Unlike anyone who buys games digital. So if you're someone who likes to trade your games, this is another option for you. I also think that Nintendo didn't really help themselves by giving it a name. They could have slipped it under the radar like PlayStation and Xbox have. I hope you see my perspective, and I'm open to hearing others too. Let's be friendly, it's video games we're talking about here. And just so you know, I'm not one of those people who would just skip a game because it's on the game key card. That's silly. Speaking of game keycards, we gotta talk about the storage on the console. I've had to purchase so many games already. The internal storage just isn't enough if you're an intense gamer such as me. I do have a 256GB Express SD card, but even that's not quite enough. Usually I'll find some chunky game I forgot I downloaded and delete it, but eventually I'll wanna keep everything. That's where the 1TB microSD Express card would come in handy, but I can't find one anywhere, or cheaper. Oh, I also want to give a quick game chat update. This is 100 days later. How am I feeling about it? Well, back when I reviewed the console after 1 month, I actually really liked it. And 100 days later, I've got the same thoughts. Nothing's really changed much. It's surprisingly good, and having it built right into the system without any extra accessories is nice. Now, I feel like in the last month, there still haven't been many games where I've needed to use it, but it's nice when I eventually will use it in a game. Now, let's go over some of the accessories I've been using. Here's my accessory dance. First and best so far is the official Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller. It's insanely comfortable and probably my favorite controller ever. The buttons are soft yet firm, the gyro and rumble are top tier, and best of all, it has a C button. No, I'm just kidding, it's the texture. I really like the texture. I don't know what it is about the plastic, but it just feels so good, especially compared to the Switch 1 Pro controller. Now, the D-pad isn't perfect. I don't love the D-pad, but everything else about it is kind of making it easier on me. What about the camera? I barely use this thing. I might turn it on if I'm in a game chat, but I don't really use game chat enough to justify the price. It's neat in certain games, but most of the time it's just there. And recently I just had it on my TV stand, not even plugged in, so I don't know. The most surprising accessory I'm still using is the all-in-one carrying case. This thing is insanely overpriced, and I only have it because I bought it for my big Nintendo Switch unboxing. But I keep using it because the soft sides make it easy to tuck into my backpack. Still, I'm sure you can find something just as good or better on Amazon for like half the price. Joy-Con wheels though. I don't use those. Those are the main accessories I've been using over and over again, but it's nice to have some power banks handy. A solo case that holds games is also good to have. That's not the crappy first-party Nintendo one. I would say I've literally put my Switch 2 through the ringer. Seriously, I put it underwater. For the most part, the console body looks good. No major dings or scratches. The screen looks great, and my screen protector definitely helps with that. I always recommend a screen protector. The people who aren't putting a $10 screen protector on their $500 console are actually insane. But how's it holding up? Well, it still works, so that's good for me. But I've noticed some cosmetic damage on the poor little guy. All the buttons still function, but the worst cosmetic damage is the kickstand. And I don't even know why. But I've got multiple scuffs only on the kickstand. And because it's made of metal, when it scratches, the scratches are shiny and very noticeable. There are deep scratches, but also a lot of really small marks you can see clearly when you shine a light on it. This could be from my above average abuse of the console, or maybe just normal use. Who knows? I guess sliding it in and out of the dock could be causing it. The only other cosmetic marks I've noticed are on the inside where the Joy-Cons connect. To my surprise, there are very few marks and maybe some even tiny indents. This is barely noticeable right now, but I'm curious to see how much longer it takes before it becomes obvious. Now, shifting our focus to the Joy-Cons themselves. This is actually where I've seen most of the wear and tear. Again, both are fully functional, which is a huge dub. However, the scuffs on these Joy-Cons are much more noticeable than I thought they would be, especially only 100 days later. Mainly on the red and blue parts where they connect. Some of these scuffs can actually be wiped chipped away, but others are definitely permanent. This is probably from the wacky accessories I use for my videos, but hey, these are real world tests, and the accessories I use are available for everyone, so it's fair game. So I say that these Joy-Cons were fully functional, but I have had some weird issues with them. For some reason, my right bumper can be a little finicky sometimes. Every once in a while, it just won't register until I press it really hard. Then it works perfectly fine. Sometimes it feels stiff, but once I click it a few times, it goes back to normal. This is just a weird quirk I think only my Switch 2 has. The bigger issue though has to do with these analog sticks. And no, it's not Joy-Con drift. Whew. That was a close one. If you look closely, there's a little piece of rubber inside the stick that looks like a tiny hat. Sometimes that rubber folds on itself, making the Joy-Con stiff and not fully functional. This rarely happens, and it only really happens when I put some weird accessory on the stick, but it's surprising that it already happened a handful of times. Luckily, it's easy to fix just by moving the stick around a bit. Now, if we take a closer look at the top of the analog sticks, this part actually worries me. My left Joy-Con already has a small ding in it, just an indent, and it looks like part of the plastic layer has worn off. The sticks were kind of matte textured at first, but the more I've used them, the shinier they've become. You can even see a ring where the old texture ends and the new, duller one begins. Overall, the Joy-Cons are still in great shape and feel extremely premium. Yes, there are some cosmetic blemishes, but compared to the Switch 1, this is miles better. As for the overall design of the console, I gotta say, I still love the magnets. It's a night and day difference compared to the Switch 1. Like I've said many times before, it's so satisfying to snap on and off. Also, the size of the Switch 2 makes it a little bit easier to play for long sessions. I can play handheld for hours without much of an issue, unless I'm holding the A button down for Mario Kart. Well, that one just kills me. I've even played this for a few hours straight on an airplane recently, and didn't feel much discomfort at all. But how's the display after 100 days? For the first month, I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed that we didn't get an OLED screen. The colors and contrast felt lower than I initially expected, and that's just how it is with non-OLED panels. But after over 100 days, my eyes must have adjusted. Some games actually look really good, and aside from the deep blacks you miss with the OLED, this screen feels noticeably brighter and, most importantly, sharp. On the Switch 1, I'd constantly see all the pixels. Here, the 1080p display is crisp. Sure, there are some games that run at lower resolutions, but when a game outputs a native 1080p, it looks fantastic. I also really appreciate the 120Hz display. Not many games take advantage of it yet, but the ones that do make me want to do this. Yeah. The best thing about the screen though is the size of it. Hooey boy, that's a nice little size. It just hits different. The Switch 1 screens weren't necessarily too small, but having a big boy just like this makes everything feel more immersive. Of course, it does make it a little harder to travel with, especially if you're coming from a Switch Lite, and it can be tougher for people with small hands, but for me, it's not really an issue. My baby hands strike again, what can I say? One thing I should mention is the battery. After 100 days, how is it holding up? Have I actually found it to be that big of a problem? Well, let me tell you about it. A lot of people say the Switch 2 doesn't last long enough for marathon gaming sessions, and I agree that the 2 to 2.5 hour battery life isn't great, especially compared to the 5 hour plus battery life on the Switch OLED. That said, for me it wasn't a huge issue. I rarely play longer than 2 hours straight, and if I do, I usually have a power bank beside me or literally any source of power. So yes, the battery isn't amazing, but for my playstyle at least, it's fine. So that's my overall opinion on the hardware itself, after over 100 days. I went more in depth with some things in my 1 month review, but this is everything new that I felt was worth mentioning. After 100 days of using the Nintendo Switch 2, the biggest issue is Nintendo themselves. I hate saying that, but it is. The hiccups with how they're handling new releases, and especially pricing, is making it harder and harder to recommend the Switch 2. Like I said earlier, it's kind of just pushing past a lot of people's budgets. I'm thankful they're actually releasing a ton of games, and that the future lineup looks strong, but after 100 days, the drama I feel like is ramping up even more. Now that Nintendo can just get back to being the more budget-friendly option they've always been known for. But I still like my Nintendo Switch 2. How long have you had your Nintendo Switch 2, and are you liking it so far? Once again, check out my second channel. We have lots of epic content for you there. And hey, consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.